Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 219. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed founder of Omen Comics and the creator of the Omenverse, Michael Nunneley.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on the show.
Michael, yeah, it's great talking to you. We missed out on a week or so because I got COVID, needless to say. So thank you for being flexible, because I know when we reached out and we were chatted together back in August, I really did a deep dive and learned more about all of the comic books that you have for Omen Comics. And I'm really excited to talk to you about that. For those that might be unfamiliar with Omen Comics, do you want to give people a little bit of a background on the Omenverse?
On the Omenverse, sure. The Omenverse itself is a blend of the world's mythologies, folklore, and even a blend of several religions. The whole idea is that all the gods you know of all exist at the same time, and actually that's a little bit more complicated than you might imagine, because all the mythologies in the world assume that they're the only gods in existence. So I really had to try and I had to change some things to get them all to work together and fit together in one universe. But we pretty much you got all of that going on. Plus, we blend that with apocalyptic themes and apocalyptic things from several different cultures. So that's going to be going on. And plus, I'm a huge horror fan, so there's going to be some horror elements in there as well. But yeah, we got a little paranormal, some supernatural stuff going on, and of course we have heroes, but they're kind of heroes in spite of themselves. They're as a general rule, with the exception of Dragon Girl and Albino Warrior, everyone in the Omenverse is completely broken. these are these are not good and proper people, except for those two.
Right. So talk to us. You did mention already about Dragon Girl and Albino Warrior. Did you want to? Is that one of your main masthead titles that you have in the Omenverse?
Oh no, no. There's actually several titles in
Mm,
the Omenverse, and really, I'll tell you something. I originally conceived this really giant story, and I tried to tell it in just a single title. But it was
mm,
just so convoluted. I was constantly having to cut from this scene to this scene to this scene to try and tell everything that was happening all at the same time. You know what I mean? So it
right.
just got to where I had to break it up. And so consequently, it's broken into 7 titles altogether. There's Omen, Gallowsman, White Druid of Michael Nero, Guardians of Aleum, Dragon Girl, Albino Warrior. Oh, 6, my bad. And Dark Oracles.
Okay. All right. And so, were you able to put those in place on interconnecting storylines, and how did you fit that into the actual larger meta plot?
Oh, well, I have the whole story written out.
Okay.
So basically, it was just the reason that I'm releasing them in the order that they're in, and the stories that are in them is because I'm trying to keep everything chronologically in order and all the events. And so even with like Dragon Girl Albino Warrior, I had to go back and say, because there's a huge blood moon that really defines the time period in the
Mm,
Omenverse, and that's why it's the symbol for Omen Comics. Um,
right.
and even when I wrote Dragon Girl Albino Warrior, I had to go back and fit it into the timeline by saying this is this many days before the blood moon started, or this is this many days after it started. That kind of a thing.
Right. Now, what exactly is it? Because you mentioned like the blood moon piece of it. How does that fit within? You mentioned the gods aspect of it. How does that fit within the plot?
I can tell you this, that it is not your average blood moon. This is not a lunar eclipse. The moon itself is literally red.
Mm,
It was turned red, and by a magical source. And
okay.
so check this out. This part I actually really like, and this is part of the horror element I'm adding into the story. Uh, the blood moon is actually emanating these rays, and the
Okay.
rays are actually they're affecting people psychically. They're causing people to act out of character. In fact, like there's a scene where I got like an old lady. I mean, like old lady, like with a purse and everything, right? Uh, uh, she's giving somebody a curb check, stomp, a curb stomp right on the
Right.
side of the curb, right? This is not normal behavior. There's parts where people are just sitting there casually eating each other.
Wow.
Just random stuff like that where people are changing, they're being affected by this blood moon. And so
Right.
that's one of the reasons why it is such a staple in the universe itself, because it's affecting everyone.
Right. And does that come in through that what you mentioned before is like the like the actual comic book Omen?
Yes. Yeah. The blood moon actually is important in a few different titles. Um,
Okay.
for instance, the coming of Omen was actually yeah, I can say this. The coming of Omen was actually foretold, and it
Okay.
would be by the coming of this a tetrad event. When it comes to blood moons, is actually when a blood moon can only happen every 6 months or so, right? So a
Okay.
tetrad is when you have four blood moons in a row. So every 6 months you get a blood moon. The event that's coming up, the big huge apocalyptic event at the end, is going to be is going to be all wrapped up in that. But that blood moon showing up actually sets off several events that culminate in that big huge event there at the end there. It is the
Okay.
catalyst for several of the main plot lines.
Mm. Now, did you have when you put this together? How are you writing it as as the creator of this? Are you writing one one title, and then going to a different title, then to a different title, and then you're doing issue one of all of them first, and then going back to do issue two of all of them, or how are you staggering that out?
That is pretty much how we're doing it. Yeah. We
Okay.
we started out with the first three comics with like you'll notice that with Omen, with White Druid and Michael Nero, and with Gallows Men, there are two titles on each of those. But with
Right.
Dragon Girl, Albino Warrior, and with Guardians of Alayam, there's just the one. The very next Omen Comics title coming out is going to be Dark Oracles. Now,
Oh, okay.
check this out. Like I said, we do have these five main titles going, but Dark Oracles is really for. I got a really enormous story going here. I've been writing it. I've been writing it for a lot of years, and so there's a lot of stuff that will just not fit into not fit comfortably into the main continuity. Like it would really take us out of the story or take us away from it or whatever. And so
Mm,
Dark Oracles is going to be a place where we can tell all the little side stories and backstories for characters and events and stuff. Like for instance, the Guardians of Alayam there. In the very first issue of Dark Oracles, Steve Sellers, the other writer in Omen Comics, is doing a story about run of called the Rose of Seleucia. About one of
okay.
his characters there in Guardians of Alayam. It's going to pick up the story right where Guardians of Alayam leaves off. And then I'm doing a story about called "What Separates Us from Them." That
Mm,
is about, like, for instance, I don't know how much you know about the biblical story, but I always kind of wondered, why did Cain kill Abel? What made
right.
Cain so much different from Abel that he was the first murderer and nobody else was? I mean, what was that thing? And I wanted to explore the things that made Cain and his descendants different from those of the other ones. And so I get into that. I get into a little bit of the history of the gods and the beginning of man, all that kind of stuff there in that first Dark Oracle story. So we
Okay.
got that coming up next from them.
Okay. Now, what are some of your? So you said you've been working on this story for this universe for a lot of years. When did you start putting this together?
Well, a lot of the characters have been around for like 30 years.
Wow.
I actually wrote my first comic when I was 12 years old. It was very derivative and it was not all that great. But I did write one nonetheless. And I've actually been kind of creating characters since then, in general. But when I really put them together in their own universe was back in like I want to say it was 2014, 2015, is
Okay.
when I started putting them together in their own universe. Um, and then it just kind of built from there. I actually originally got hired to create a universe for another publisher, and they ended up not paying me, so I walked with the rights to everything that I did.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and so that was actually what inspired me. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do something on my own. Then I don't need to have I don't need to work for somebody else. I got my own stories. I got my own characters. I'll do my own thing. And so I really started putting it into that. So I'm going to say the first comic I think was written in, I want to say, 2016.
Okay.
And we published the very first one we published was White Druid of Michael Nero #1, and that was in January of 2019.
Okay. Okay. Now, where did you find your artist?
Um, I used to run before I started Omen Comics. I used to run an online comic book magazine where I would review comics and do articles and interview artists and stuff like that. And I actually met Tosin Awasika doing interviews for that magazine. In fact, that's where I met Steve Sellers as well. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I interviewed him for this artist spotlight kind of thing, and he was a bit shy and somewhat reserved, but he has a lot of talent, and he gets better. I think with each issue, I am more impressed than I was with the last issue. Is what I'm noticing
Wow.
with him.
Mm.
Yeah, it was just through that I approached him. I said, "Hey, man, look, this is my budget. This is what I want to do. Are you interested?" And he was. So I've been with him ever since. That was back in 2018.
Wow. Okay. And so, and he does he does all of your series?
He has done every book from Omen Comics and Revelation Comics. In
Wow.
fact,
Okay.
he is also the writer on Insurrection Fox Operations from Revelation Comics.
Talk to us a bit about this connection between Omen Comics and Revelation Comics.
Okay. Um, I had originally brought on Steve Sellers, like I said, from my Chico Comics page days, and
Hmm.
he was bouncing around this idea he had for the Blitzverse. He had these characters, uh, Blitz and Night Spider, and he had this whole story that he was talking about maybe doing in prose or something like that. And I was like,
Mm.
"Hey, man, what do you say? We do that. You let me publish that for you. What do you say we work on putting that together?" And we did. And actually, we ended up founding Revelation Comics specifically to have a place for stories outside the Omenverse, because all the
Okay.
titles in Omen Comics are all take place in the same universe. However, we needed a place like Revelation Comics where we could tell individual standalone universe stories. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
Blitz, Insurrection, Fox Operations, my horror story, Seder. These are all totally individual universes and totally separate from Omen Comics, and that's really their point. Uh, we actually even got the name for Revelation Comics from an organization in the Blitzverse. So I mean,
Okay.
it originally was founded as a place for Blitz, but we just kind of built on it from there.
Okay. Now, because you mentioned Steve Sellers also
Yeah.
writes some of your Omenverse sales. So, how are you able to separate that out? Because as you've been talking over the last several minutes about how important this world was that you created, how much leeway do you give Steve when he writes the scripts for some of these Omenverse books?
Well, like I said, I have the stories pretty much written.
Right.
But basically, essentially it works like this. I give him the plot line for the story. I give him the overall story that we have to be going through. And I've even given him ideas for individual issues as to, okay, this is, I'd like this kind of thing to happen in here, or I'd like this event to happen in here, or something like that. And
Mm.
he kind of takes those things and runs with it. Like I'd like to point out, for instance, like with the White Druid of Michael Nero title, I honestly tried to write that myself, and I just couldn't do it in a way that I felt it just didn't feel right, like
Right.
my whole run with it was, Michael Nero has the third sight, which means he can see all planes of existence at once, which
Oh,
means
cool.
he can see all kinds of nightmarish creatures. He can see horrible things happening all around him all the time, because everything on every plane is happening all at once to him. And so my solution for that character was, okay, well then he's going to be a heroin addict. Get rid of all that, and so I kind of just I kind of wrote him as this drug addled kind of character, and it really kind of took him away from the Sherlock Holmes roots that I had him originally. So I handed it over to Steve, and I was like, "Hey, man, can you do anything with this?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, let me mess around with it." And honestly, he does White Druid of Michael Nero way better than I could have at all. In fact, that's why he has co-creator credit on it.
Okay. So how did he rewrite the characters?
Well, I think how, like one thing for sure that he did was, I made it in my original story. I had it that he was a current heroin addict. In
Okay.
fact, the what is it? How does he phrase that in Sherlock Holmes book? The Was it the 8% solution, the 12% solution, something like that? With
Mm.
Sherlock Holmes, he originally did cocaine. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Okay.
he would inject it into himself, and part of the reason he even did cases originally was so that he could get money to buy cocaine. And so I was
Okay.
kind of playing off that idea that Michael Nero would take on these paranormal cases and stuff as a means to support his heroin addiction. And so that was kind of changed. Steve kind of put that in his past, where he said, "Okay, we're gonna have where he was an addict, and maybe fighting that addiction is something that he's going to deal with going through in the story." But he also added this kind of father-son element to White Druid and Michael Nero. Uh, in how he wrote it, Lou really brings Michael out of that nightmare that I had originally wrote him in. Lou really brings him into a much more controlled character. And he also adds a lot more of that Sherlock Holmes element that I was going for.
So yeah, so this kind of, compared to some of the other series, this one isn't really so much action adventure, but more of a investigative mystery of the week kind of setup.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of a paranormal noir type of an idea.
Okay.
Where you'll notice in the very first parts of this issue that we're looking at here, you one of the first time we see Michael Nero, he's actually on a case where he has to exorcise a demon from somebody.
Oh wow.
Right, and then later we see him get hired on by somebody else who wants him. Basically, in the Omenverse, Michael Nero is our world's greatest detective.
Okay. And then, so where does the White Druid come into that? Are they almost like as a Watson kind of situation, or does the White Druid also have some specific, other than being a 3,000-year-old Celtic deity? How does that relationship work between the two?
It's a very father son kind of a thing going on with them,
Okay.
where Lou kind of plays the father figure, but at the same time, I mean, they kind of need each other. Um,
Okay.
Michael Nero is not very great with social etiquette. In fact, just to give you an idea, one of the lines that I wrote for him is, this lady tells him, "Don't condescend to me, you bastard." And he says, "Well, could you come up here then?" He's that kind of character where he's very blunt, sometimes to his own detriment. But he's also very, very intelligent, but he really doesn't interact with people very well. Like you'll notice the in that scene you saw there where with the taxi cab there. Um, the guy brings up the name Michael Nero and makes a comment about maybe he plays violin or something, and so Michael Nero just drops his money on the ground, makes him get out of the cab and pick it up. I mean, he's just so really Nero needs help in that aspect. White Druid is kind of I can't say too much without spoiling it, but let's just say he's not quite himself. And
Mm,
he actually kind of needs Michael Nero to take care of him as well. So they
okay.
kind of have this mutual benefit thing going on.
And what's the overlap between titles? Because you do mention that the white druid is actually also a part of it's connected somehow to the Guardians of
Elaim,
Aleum.
yes, yes, he is one of the guardians of Elaim.
Okay.
Uh, you,
So
you you see him in the Guardians of Elaim story,
mhm,
but it's one of those kind of blink and you'll miss it kind of things. He was there, but is not actually part of that main story in that first issue. There, he shows up. He shows up a bit later, but
okay.
um, it. How do I put that? Lou is kind of like do you remember in The Hobbit where Gandalf kind of showed up once in a while, and then he'd kind of show up and fix things once in a while, and then he'd disappear, and then everybody'd
Yeah.
be like, "Where's Gandalf?" And oh well, we'll just go off on ourselves, and then he'd show up later, save everything, and then kind of disappear again. Like uh, in that kind of fashion. Lou fits into the Guardians of Aleum, where
Right.
he is definitely part of the team, but yeah, you're definitely going to see him in there. It's
Right.
just he's a bit of a wandering wizard sometimes.
Right. Now, so talk to us a bit about, putting on your writer hat on this. What are some of the things that you do now as a writer that you wished you did, say, 10, 15 years ago?
Oh, jeez, man. I um, I basically jumped in to the deep end and then taught myself how to swim when it comes to all of this. I honestly thought that because I had written some prose that I knew how to write a comic. And that is just not true. They are completely different animals. And I wish I had done a bit more research into what it takes to actually write a comic. There are a lot of things I know now about pacing and about what how much room you got to put on the page and accounting for the art and the lettering and all that kind of stuff. And it's just I didn't know much about visual storytelling as well.
Mm,
So I was more thinking about the pictures as a way to carry the words as opposed to the other way around.
right. Okay.
And they really need to work together as opposed to if anything the pictures need to be carrying the scene.
Right.
But I think they really need to work together, but I really didn't understand any of that. I also didn't get like for instance, now I know that each issue has to contain a sort of mini story on its own, and what I mean by that is the character a character has to go through an arc, or something has to be resolved that he didn't quite have figured out, or an event has to have completed. So there has to be some sort of start and finish in each issue, and I didn't
Mm,
know that either. I just figured I could tell it as an ongoing story and just kind of cut off. Well, I ran out of page numbers here, so we'll cut off the story there, kind of thing. And I just there's just a lot about making comics in general. I just wish I knew it. I mean, I just so did.
right. So what would be some advice that you would give to starting comic writers?
Well, I would tell you to outline everything. I
Ooh,
mean, totally outline everything. Do not just wing it when it comes to comics, because not
Mm,
only is that going to come into play when you start dealing with continuity, it's also going to make the readability better. Also,
mm.
consider this: the more thought you put into your story, the more thought the readers are going to get out of it. So don't worry about digging into it and how many times you have to, how many drafts you have to make. You know what I'm saying? My college professor for writing actually told me that the more drafts you write, the better it is, because that means that you're putting more thought into it, that you've thought over it again and you've added to it or you've taken away from it, and that is
Huh.
always a good thing. So I'm definitely do that. Also, if you can, and granted, I understand you want to keep your story kind of secret. You know, you don't want people ripping you off or whatever, that kind of a thing. But find a group of people, at least two or three people that can see your work, because you need to have more eyes on it than your own. You can actually make the mistake of reading a line so many times that even if it's there's something wrong with it, you just don't notice it because your head fills it in. It's that whole cinema of the mind thing working there, where like I'll be reading over a sentence and it'll totally have the wrong word or words in a different order, or I'll
Huh.
misspell something or something along the line, and I just flat out won't see it because I've read it 50 times and I'm just seeing it in there now. So I mean, it definitely put a lot of thought into it. One thing I might give you as the last note uh, is punctuation in the pages. Um, you want to try to have it so that at the end of each page you give the reader a reason to turn the page. That's not something
Mm,
you necessarily have to have in a prose novel, but
right.
but a lot of prose in comics will tell you that it's important to have that. You don't have to. It's not complicated. You could just do something like, say, for instance, have somebody ask a question and they have to turn the page to get the answer to the question, or have somebody reach for something and then have them actually get it in the on the next page, or something like that. There's got to be something pulling them to the next one.
You mentioned earlier about proofreading. How important is that continuity editing and that how important is continuity editing and how important is line editing for making comics?
Um, well, I'd say it's pretty important. Editing in general is a huge part of it.
Mm.
If you think you can do this on your own, I'm here to tell you you can't. I mean, editing is not just a matter of correcting spelling mistakes or grammar. There's a lot more to editing. They like you're talking about. They help you keep track of the story. They help give you a perspective on what it's like to be the reader in the story. Like, for instance, there are things I have tried in my comics, like like I think I went through with my editor on Dragon Girl Albino Warrior. I think we went through that like 3 times,
Mm.
where I came up with an idea to open up the story, and he was like, "No, that's not gonna work. You can't do that." And I'm like, "Oh well, okay, I'll try something else." And honestly, I could say with well, sometimes it's frustrating. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, man, screw you. The story is awesome. Leave me alone. But honestly, I could say that it improves the thing. I
Mm.
think they say there's wisdom in the multitude of counsel. The more minds that are involved, the better something's going to be.
Right, right. Now, and at what point of the process do you involve the artist? I mean, how much pushback do you get from Tosin who says, "Hey, I think the frame should be like this, or I think the picture should be like this," or how does that relationship work?
There is some of that, but honestly, I kind of give Tosin somewhat free reign. The
Okay,
one issue we really had with Tosin is that, well, he lives in Nigeria. And so we have completely different measurement systems, and
right, okay,
even our computers work a little bit differently. And so, like, one of the major issues I've had with him is getting the page sizes all correct and consistent. Like a lot, like uh, a lot. I'll often get two or three different page sizes in an issue from him, And I even gave him a template. That's been a bit of a struggle. It's just that's really been the one difficulty. But as far as the line work and everything goes, like I said, he is always impressing me. With what little technical issues we may have, it's irrelevant compared to how happy I am with his work when it's done. You know what I mean? I
Right.
feel like he does a really good job with the art, and he is always improving. He's not one to just sit idly, and say, "Well, I've achieved this level, I'm fine." He is always trying to improve. He's always trying to grow, and I really appreciate that, and I think it shows in the comics.
Now, if somebody said, listen, Michael, you got a lot of titles here. What should I read first? What would be your recommendation?
Well, with the Omen comics, I would say I would read Omen #1, White Druid of Michael Neer #1, then Gallowsman #1. I'd start with that, and then go
Okay.
back and read the twos, and then the #1s from Guardians and Dragon Girl Albino Warrior.
Okay.
But the first three issues that really started it all off are those three.
Is this a finite plot? For instance, is every issue going to have, is every title going to have 4 issues or 10 issues, or how is this outlined out for
Oh
you?
yes, it is currently finite. We have 10 to 12 issues for each of the six titles planned. And
Okay.
then on top of that 10 to 12 issues, we have the major Tetrad Omega event happening at the end of that.
Hmm.
Altogether, there's going to be roughly 70 comics in this story.
And how many you putting out every year?
Well, we were putting out about two or three a year, but we were not able to get successful Kickstarters, and so we've consequently have had to back off a little and kind of get our feet back under us again. We're hoping to maybe build our audience a little bit more before we
Mm,
try it again. So I mean, for the next 2 years, we're only looking at about one comic per year.
okay. So I just did some math for you, Michael. If you do 3 comics a year for 70 comics, it's going to take you 23 years.
Yep.
Have you thought about working a bit, like, for instance, how much of this is because you have such an expansive universe? How much of this are you going to sit back like you did, sit back a little bit like you did with some of your other titles and have other people write it and you just do the creator and like the plot point of it and just farm out? You're already doing that with the artists, but also with the writing to expedite that.
Yeah. I think I've already kind of farmed out as much as I'm going to
Oh, you
farm out
can.
as far as that goes. I I'm pretty set on writing the title. Like I write Omen and
Okay.
Gallowsman, Dragon Girl, Albino Warrior. I'm writing Dark Oracles. I also writing Satyr for Revelation Comics, and I'm writing
Oh,
some other
wow.
stuff as well. So I mean that I got a lot of irons in the fire as far as writing goes.
And as you mentioned too, that you have on there, Seder, that's how you pronounce
Yes.
it? Okay, yeah. Okay. And then you have on here for Revelation Comics, you got Seder, which is also available on Global Comics
Yep. Free to
and
read.
free to read. The whole issue is?
The whole issue free to read.
Wow, okay, nice. Okay. Cool. And then on there you also, we mentioned the Blitzverse, but also Insurrection as
Right.
well. And is that one from you as well?
Insurrection Fox Operations was written and created by Tosin Awasika, but I scripted it
Okay.
for him. With all Revelation comics, with Blitz, with Insurrection, with Satyr, these are all in their own universe. They are not connected at all.
Okay.
In fact,
All right.
Satyr's only going to be a 3 issue title.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Quick little
And
Viking horror story.
Okay, that's excellent. And then after that comes out, you're going to be putting it together maybe as like a
As a
graphic
trade, yeah,
novel.
for
Okay.
sure.
When all 70 issues are done, what is the feeling you want your readers to come from with reading everything from Omen Comics?
That no matter how broken you are, no matter how far you've gone, there is a way back. Redemption is
Okay.
possible.
Okay. Wow. That's exciting. Um, and so Michael, where can people, if people are really interested in learning more about Omen Comics, what's the best place they could go to?
Well, I'm gonna say there's probably our Patreon would be a good spot to go. There's also we're on Twitter at Comics Omen.
Okay.
And also Revelation Comics is on there too at Revelation Comics. We also have a podcast, Omen Revelations podcast. That's what the ORP thing.
And so, yeah, talk to us a bit about, you have a really good Patreon page. You got
Oh, thank
some
you.
really cool things that people can check out. And you have 7 levels, which is amazing. Talk to some of our listeners and readers, listeners and viewers out there of what they could get for each of these levels.
All right. Well, let's start with that first $2 one there. Um, I kind of look at comics. I kind of view it like a movie, I guess. I
Mm,
feel like comics are a bridge between prose and film. And this is why I have this terminology here.
mm.
um, with that $2 level there, you can become an executive producer for Omen Comics, and what that means is that you'll be listed there in the credits page of every Omen comic. I mean, from the point that you start, I'm not going to like retroactively add your name into the past comics, but
Right.
from the point that you subscribe from there on, your name will be listed as an executive producer right there in the credit names below us creators,
Nice.
and you can
Okay.
get that for $2 a month. You get your
Well,
name in every one of our comics. I mean, that's pretty cool.
yeah.
That with that $3 level there, that's an Omen Revelations podcast specific tier. With that one, you get 2 weeks. You get to hear our episodes 2 weeks before everyone else. You
Oh,
also get
cool.
one Patreon exclusive episode that's just for you. If you like that one, if you're into a podcast and stuff, that's a pretty good tier.
Mm.
All right, let's see. Digital comics package. What that means is that every time we have a series of digital art that you're going to receive, but that also means that every time we get a comic, you get a digital copy. And just like with our physical copies to our comics, which you can also get on other levels, you get those before everyone. Like
Oh,
for instance,
cool.
we've had these failed Kickstarters, right? But guess what? Our patrons have gotten every single one of our comics. We
Oh,
put the,
cool.
we print them out and we send it to them, and they even get the if there's a variant cover, they get both covers. So,
Oh, wow.
like if you have a printed and digital versions, like if you go up to the like $7 ones or the nine the 5 6 those you get in there, you get the printed and the physical ones, which means that you get both versions of the printed copy sent to you, plus you get a digital copy to read before those printed ones get to you.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I mean, you're guaranteed our stuff, even if our Kickstarters are not successful, and that's pretty big. We're making these comics anyway, and we want to make
Right.
sure our patrons get it. They get first access to everything.
Okay. Wow. Excellent. And that's what you get for like the $5 and the $6.
And
And
then
then what
this
do you get for the $7?
That's where you get all the inside stuff from us. You get to
Okay.
see scripts in advance. You get previews in advance. We put up videos about our comics and about what's going on. You get all the background information about what's going on with us as a business and creators and all of that stuff. And you'll note some people I have on there. If you go up to that $7 one, that guy right there is Scott Tipton.
Huh.
I don't know if you know who that is, but he writes Star
Mm,
Trek comics for IDW. And there
cool.
he is holding 3 of my comics.
Yeah.
And then if you scroll down, you got Terry Mayo on the $10
Wow.
one there. He's also another comic book creator. I thought that would be a cool, cool little inside thing there to get some maybe more famous people hold my comics as pictures to my tiers there. I thought that would be pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's excellent. So yeah, very exciting stuff. Like you have a really robust Patreon page that I definitely wanted to share. And absolutely and listen, Michael, you got to come back on when you have more issues coming out. This has been I'm really excited to learn. I'm really excited to follow along in the Omenverse. You got a great world that you've created.
Oh man, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. The next comic we got coming out is actually going to be a Revelation comic.
Cool.
So it won't actually be until 2024 that a new Omen comic comes out.
Wow. Okay.
But in 2023 you're going to get Sad, which is another comic written by Tosin Awasika that I scripted. This one gets crazy. You get some Nigerian mythology in there. You get conspiracies. You get monsters. You get revenge. It's a crazy story. It just blows up. Let me tell you.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah, that'd be great to chat about that. That'd be fun.
All right. Yeah, I'd love to be back on. Thanks, man.
You're welcome.